My name is. I'll start again. Sorry. Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Warnick. I'm the chairman of the IDA's Alternative Energy Committee. And we're here today to talk about the Riverside project, which has been permitted by the state. And I thought we'd start by going around the table and then to those that have joined us remotely, just to introduce who we are. So, Chris?
Christine Powers, I'm a member of the Alternative Energy Committee.
Robin Stevenson with Jefferson County Economic Development.
Terry Countryman, Town Line Supervisor.
Dave Zedbeck, Jefferson County Economic Development.
Marshall Weir, Jefferson County Economic Development.
Bill Johnson, I'm a member of the Energy Committee.
Rob Aiken.
I'm Rob Aiken. I'm a board member of the Jefferson County Economic Development.
Rob Oliasso, also a board member of the IDA.
I'm Pat Gibbons. I'm the superintendent at Line Central School.
Justin Miller with Harris Beach. We represent the IDA.
Mr. Heron.
Is it Kat? Erger, or is it?
Hi, yes.
Oh, it was
Pat
you.
Berger. We're here with James Burrows.
Okay.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Hi, Jim.
We're having some technical difficulties, but we're able to watch and listen.
Okay,
Okay, so a brief background where we are is Riverside project is a 100-megawatt project that's proposed. It covers part of the town of Brownville, but the majority of it's in the town of Line, but all of it's in Line Central School District as best I can determine from what I've seen in the permits. And so we're here to just have some brief discussions about pre-planning on how we might approach this as it affects pilot taxes and those type of discussions moving forward. Currently, none of these projects have approached the IDA. There's 3 large ones in the county, one in Orleans, one in Hounsfield, Watertown, and this one. None of those projects have approached us yet formally to have discussions about pilot taxes. So trying to be ahead of the curve, we thought it'd be good to get input from every jurisdiction that's going to be affected should they approach the IDA. So we're all on the same page and we hang together so we can get the best deal for everyone moving forward. If you're not aware, the state has this year finally got their model for appraising these projects for assessors approved and used. I know the town of Lyme has used it on the project in the town, the smaller project that last night Sunday night I sent out to everyone. I didn't have the school emails. Did those go out today?
I just sent them out this morning. I just realized Paul sent them to us a couple of days ago, but Marshall, I didn't find them or see them until today, so.
I hope everyone has them, but we have them on the screen to give you an idea of what we're looking at, how this might value out if the project was in existence this year in the town of Lyme. It's a little confusing because it crosses into 2 towns. You have to weight the effective tax rate, but I just used the full value effective tax rate for the town of Lyme, so we would be pretty much all on the same page. It's not going to make a significant difference when it's weighted out, but it'll make a little bit of difference. So before we go any further, is there any questions of the agency or myself or any board members? So there's 2 ways that this valuation model works. One is if they own the land, and one if it's on leased land. And when you read the information put out by the developer, it was unclear whether it was all leased land or a combination leased and purchased. I'd love to tell you how that'll affect it if it's leased, some leased and some purchased, but there's absolutely no guidance on how to use this model. coming from the state in that instance. So I gotta see which one Marshall's got up there first.
This is the,
So the first, can everyone see the screen that Marshall has put up?
can you see it? Yep, okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, so this is.
Yep.
This is the valuation considering it was on lease land. Naturally, until they make an application, we can't require them to tell us what their lease payments will be or what the inflation is. So I've used a ballpark figure, what I've seen elsewhere. It could be higher, could be lower, we don't know yet. But I estimated that for this project, they're gonna have about a $750,000 annual lease payment. And 1.5% annual inflation number we've seen on other projects. On leases. So basically, it's 100 megawatt tracking system in the Mohawk Valley District as established by the state. With I have a construction as a 1/1/23 and figuring its taxable status date of March 1st. So those are the inputs you have to put in to get to a value. Marshall, if you go to the next sheet, which is the leased land. So on leased land,
This one here
no, it would be,
on the next,
that's the sheet we're looking for.
let's see, the next. Oh,
Go to,
here we go.
it should be say leased land on it.
I use that.
It's not, it's gonna, just click through and we'll find it. Go down to the, scroll down a little bit. This is what the machine, okay, this is for the leased land, and you'll see that. When you have it on leased land, the state's valuation model only spits out what the improvements to the property are valued at. The assessor would then be required to value the land as they see fit. So you want to scroll down a little bit, Marshall. So we're looking around, if it was there this year, March 1st, it would have been valued around $37 million, 37.7. Okay, and that's going to generate about a full tax load. $7,000 or a little less. I think I wrote it in the email I got. 67. So it's going to be between $6,000 and $7,000 full tax load on this project. If you go to their presentations they made that are all published on the ORES site, they're claiming this project has a cost approaching $150 million. So that gives you an idea of how much off a cost the state has pushed this valuation model to. So it's going to be about 30% probably of cost, which means a little obscene, but this project, unlike the Tracy project and the Boralex project, did not receive a strike price or a renewable energy credit award. So this doesn't have those built into the system. Okay. And to give you an idea what the land in total might be, if you go to open up the sheets, Marshall, again.
What, it won't let me go down to the darn thing here.
It's a separate sheet.
I know, I can't move this thing.
Well, anyhow, I can get to it quicker. I'll do it on my phone, Marshall.
This one right here?
So if you go down, so to give you an idea what land and total would value out with, if they own the land, you're looking at about 46 million. So it's saying that the land that contributory land value in this is about $9 million of the project. So it may be assessed at $500 an acre today is what it is, but when it's converted to commercial, it'll have a significantly different value. So we're in the range here of, 37 to $46 million of new valuation. Should this project become a reality. So at 70, what I said, $6,700 a megawatt, that's $670,000 of tax revenue, full value a year. And depending if the taxing jurisdictions agree to take less than full taxation, it'll go down from there. Another unknown is just in 1 year, changes in the equalization rate in the town of Lyme, plus the depreciation factor this model has built in, lowered a 5 megawatt project by almost $300,000 from full value. So these values will probably go down annually because of the state's depreciation factor that they're going to build into this moving forward, plus what they do with the discount rate. So there's a lot of factors that are going to be moving in this. And one concern's always got to be is that we can't exceed full taxation with any pilot. And as our council has told us that it's statutory that if our pilot exceeds this, we can't build them for more than full taxation. And Justin, you can interrupt me if I'm wrong. But
No, that's correct. The pilot metrics generally require full taxes on the land plus the per megawatt charge associated with the improvements. So there'll be a base pilot payment that's associated with your estimated $9 million of land value, plus an amount that makes sense for the per megawatt charge. You've stated that 67,000 per megawatt might slot in at full taxes for the improvements. So it seems to me that any pilot discussions would be around that threshold or slightly lower. The IDA typically negotiates something around 5,500 per megawatt for the improvements and charges full taxes on the land assessed value as converted to commercial. So those are generally the metrics that we're working within. From there, there's always considerations with respect to, in this case, the town of Brownville and the town of Lyme regarding their perspective and expectations for a host community agreement, if any. And then certainly the county's position on taxation adds another wrinkle and another perspective to take into account as the IDA kind of frames the whole pilot discussion and works collaboratively with the towns, the school, and the county.
And we also have what has been we've heard consistently from the schools is the end of pilot tax cap consideration. So those are some of the nuances we have to get through to try to mitigate any of these issues that are out there or deal with those issues.
Hey, Paul, it's Rob Leasso. Another escalator we've spoken about and haven't really identified the best route, but is there any prime farmland soils being taken out of circulation in this project?
Well, Jay's not here, but when you cross the Black River to the north, I've always been told that the quality of the soils drops off somewhat with that.
Okay.
In our other discussions with Boralex, there are clearly some of the best soils in any of these projects. But
okay, so there may not be any in this project, but we're not certain.
Excuse me?
There may not be any in this project, but we're not certain entirely.
Right. We've been told there's no what you would call prime soils. There's good soils, but not soils in any of these projects. Okay. So the question is,
we never fully identified what soil classification or what threshold or exactly what that escalator would look like. I know Lewis County formalized something and we've just talked about it. So I guess we can stick a pin in that and consider that with Jay's input once he looks at the project map.
We can revisit, I think we finally dropped that only because I think if I recall, the philosophy from the board perspective was that it's up to the locals to approve, or not, of course, that's gonna be different with these products, but the other one, you know, the locals and
Okay.
with the full approval authority.
Yeah, I don't remember dropping it for these big projects. I remember dropping it for the small community solar.
Ag and Markets is a party to the ORES approval process, and if there was an issue with the soils. Well, I shouldn't say that, they didn't opine even in Portland where there are better soil.
Okay.
But Ag and Markets has been part of the process. And even with the Borlex project, they kind of dismissed the Farm Bureau's concerns. So the other problem is all these other projects we looked at, these community solars have a different revenue stream. If you were to look at how the smaller projects value, they value higher per megawatt than this project does, because they have the value of distributed energy, and then they get another credit, which is calculated. So full taxation on a community solar may be above $9,000 a megawatt. So even at our goal in our UTEP is 50% of taxation over the life of the pilot. So we're meeting that with the community solars. But these other ones, if we push it too high, my belief is that the value is going to decline every year because the solar panels degrade. Unless there's a huge increase in the cost of energy, the revenue stream is not going to change dramatically. And
Well, I think New York State's trying real hard to make energy double in price, but that's another discussion.
but I believe the concern we have to have is that at some point, I'm afraid down the road during the next 15 years with these projects, we're going to cross that line where the pilot may be more than what the full taxation is. And with these projects, there's nothing we can really do about that because of the state valuation model.
What we could do is, I mean, since the state valuation model theoretically, assuming it stays in place, is gonna be decreasing over time anyway. As do our pilot payment structure in these projects. We could
Start high and drop
we
low.
start high, drop low, we would fit as close as we want to that threshold as we think is appropriate. And just stay right, and what, for the benefit of the projects, we maybe do a set schedule based on those estimated values in the state, and at least it gives that predictability to the developer.
They have full value.
But we keep it right near full value.
Well,
There's
there's,
always less than full.
we've always done these fixed price pilots. And when we did the declining value in the pilots, that was to get, hopefully at the end of the pilot, that full taxation, when it goes to full taxation in the pilot, you don't have this big difference between those two numbers. Now we have to think about full taxation, but it was just a mechanism of law that if we do cross that, the pilot reverts to full taxation. Can we write into a pilot at that point? The pilot is thrown out and they just go to normal taxation from that point forward. So if it's a 10-year, let's say it's a 15-year pilot, and in year 8, we cross that line, does the pilot end? Can we write into it that the pilot ends at the point that they cross? And then we can get out of the whole tax cap issue.
So Justin, say we have a 15-year pilot. Did you hear Paul's question? Before I repeat it?
Yeah, if you just repeat it, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so what Paul's saying, so say we have a 15-year pilot. And at some point in time, our pilot payment exceeds what the value of the project is. At that point, do we just collect the full value, which, up to the full value? Or does the pilot just end? Do we just end the pilot at that point and get out of it altogether? Or do we have either option?
Well, you have a couple of options. If the pilot is structured in the fashion that we typically draft them, the payment is the payment. given this new compression with the assessment structure, we could start including language that states the pilot payment shall be the lesser of, with basically a ceiling on whatever the pilot structure would normally dictate, full taxes on land plus a fixed megawatt amount, or it'd be the lesser of what full taxes would be assessed on the project if the agency wasn't involved. So there could be a mechanism added that would allow the property to remain on the taxable rolls inside pilot with a maximum amount of revenue that's tied to taxes. Absent that, if the pilot payment didn't have that threshold, or the pilot contract didn't have that threshold, they'd be required to pay more than full taxes. And the next move would be, well, geez, we need to terminate the pilot or modify it. I think we should probably start thinking about including that trigger for all projects, not just the major ORAs approved, big ones, but even the community solars, in case they're at some point in the next 2 to 3 years would begin to identify payments that would exceed normal taxes.
Justin, you represent a lot of other IDAs or counties that have these projects. Are you seeing the same concern about declining assessments based upon the new model? Are you hearing anything like that? Or are we overly worried here, overly cautious?
And no, I would say that you're cautious and ahead of the curve in terms of identifying the nuances. So it's good to have you as an asset, Paul. All IDAs are looking at this, and it's really, in the first instance, starting when we do cost benefit analyses, which we're required to do. Every IDA needs to put together a basic analysis of what full taxes would be compared to pilots, and then also estimate sales and mortgage tax benefits. In order to do that, there's a base assumption on what's this thing going to be assessed at. In the last 5 years, the general approach, give or take, has been around $1 million a megawatt just for throwing grass in the air and making a guess. It's more like $500,000 or $600,000 now, and what you're suggesting, based upon this granular down to the nitty gritty analysis, including the land aspects, it's more like maybe 300,000 to 400,000 megawatt where this thing lands. So that's going to have a dynamic effect on how IDAs estimate assistance, and as we just discussed, how we capture that in pilot contracts, so we don't end up exceeding full tax within the pilot. It's important to note that pressure can be alleviated at the outset. If the towns have a host community agreement in place, the pilot's naturally going to have, it's kind of like whack-a-mole. You push down on one and the other goes up. The overall payment profile for any particular project is going to have HCA and pilot aspects associated with it. So to the extent that towns have a host community agreement and the pilot is lowered in consideration of that, we may have kind of a natural cushion or offset that we wouldn't necessarily under the pilot hit full taxes, because there's separate contracts with the town where that revenue exists, and there's no probe on how much a town can charge or what that host community payment structure looks like.
Could a developer waive that portion of the law in a pilot that exceeds full taxation? If we agree to a schedule, could he waive challenging that in a contractual agreement in a pilot?
That would be good and nice, but the statute, and I can circulate the exact language, it's really a statutory imposition on the IDA under, I think, General Municipal Law, Section 858-15. I might be wrong. It basically says the pilot shall, require payments or contain payments that won't exceed full taxes. So it's a legal requirement on us that the developer or the counterparty can't necessarily waive.
You don't need to share that. That was my understanding that it was written that way. My question was, do they have the right, to waive that? Could we ask them to waive that? But
Yeah, we've
others
had
want
instances.
it, that's fine, but
Yeah,
it's the
we've had
same in
instances.
487, correct? Real property.
That's correct. If the taxing jurisdiction approves an exemption under 487, they can enter into a pilot for less than what full taxes would be, but their pilot can never collect more than what full taxes would be. So, and we exchanged some messages in the last few days. I pointed out that, for example, a town, especially in a rural environment, that has little or no ad valorem tax levy, $1 or something, and or less, they're at a disadvantage to structure a pilot that has like a per megawatt charge, because you'll never really know what full taxes may be. So that, again, the better place to structure that revenue with a town is in a host community agreement that doesn't have those constraints. And then if the exemption profile and the exemption mechanism is deployed through the IDA, we can keep an eye on those, that bogey, if you will, what full taxes might be for distribution. And to the extent that we collect a full pilot payment and it exceeds full taxes, then, we would have to make an adjustment, or the contract could have a mechanism that naturally lowers the pilot payment to the full levy.
One last question, and I don't think I know the answer. Is there a definition anywhere of what a host community agreement is? What a host community is? Like, is a school, the county, and we know the town is clearly a host agreement by that, but could the school and the county be a host?
There's no, I don't think, any specific definition, but in common nomenclature and understanding is that a host community and a host community agreement are intended to structure payments that are being made to absorb or address extraordinary impacts created by a particular project. And naturally, when you look at projects like this, or even a significant housing project or a manufacturing facility or any particular project that has impacts on roadways, infrastructure, fire, water, sewer, or otherwise, it's really towns where it lands. You might have instances where a county is delivering services or would absorb extraordinary impacts, county road or county district issues. And this is no slight or implication for our friends at the school district, but this kind of project in particular wouldn't naturally bear or have to take on any extraordinary impacts. If this was a housing project with 500 apartments and it's multifamily and there's an estimate of 40 school children in a given year that are going to be located in that facility, and we're talking about a pilot, the pilot should probably take into account for them to deliver educational services, expand their facilities, build a new wing, address busing, transportation, et cetera. And I've seen instances where pilots have been restructured, and there's been detailed studies and a trip study on how a project or a group of TOD projects down in Westchester, for example. We have one IDA that deployed a study because they were getting hit with a wave of 2,000 new apartments. What does that really mean for the school district? So they've come up with a mechanism where, and actually a specific dollar amount per student that an apartment building might generate, and there's a supplemental payment required for the first 10 years to the school district to address those specific impacts. In this case, we have panels in a field. So I think the natural place for an HCA would land within Lyme and Brownville in this particular instance.
Okay. Now, in discussions with Terry in the past, we talked about alternative distribution schedules to mitigate some of the issue potentially with a tax cap. That would make this a deviation, correct? If we had alternative distribution schedules.
Alternative distribution schedule, yes, in this case, it's a deviation anyways, because of being over 20 megawatts in our use.
Okay,
Even if we did
so if we
pro
were
rata distribution, still be a deviation in the requirement. What we have done, with the project before, we're basically, when the school account, they still end up with their pro rata share. But the county agreed to take less early on, which was more, so that the county took more at the end, so school could take less time to get that increase in revenue. But yeah.
to deal with the tax cap.
It was a particularly large project.
So there-
Yeah, if we stay within 15 years, it's not necessarily a deviation on its face, but the way that the UTEP is drafted, we have to get affirmative consents for any projects over 20 megawatts. So we do need to work closely with and collaborate with both towns, the school district and the county, to get consents to close on a pilot over 20 megawatts. Those consents could speak to distribution models outside of pro rata. And that conversation could be tempered by, or at least linked to, host community agreement metrics that either Brownville or Lyme would introduce as part of the project. Again, the school largely is, under the law, is going to see the majority of the distribution under the pilot agreement, just by virtue of their mill rate.
But yes, we can do alternatives.
Are you aware of any legislative efforts to amend the tax cap law to deal with the end of pilot tax cap that's going to be hitting every school district that has a large project? It's got to be statewide issue.
Yeah, there's a one house bill that we've been hoping will get picked up in both to correct this. You may recall in 2017 or 2018, there was a Herculean effort to address the growth factor implication that most affects schools. At the time, the former governor was somewhat obstinate because the tax cap was a bit of his policy jewel in his crown, if you will, and it was vetoed. There's a refreshed effort in that regard to take the pressure off, not just schools, but all the taxing jurisdictions with that dramatic shift of value from roll 8 to roll 1 at the end of pilot. We have, 2 days to figure out if that thing gets wheels. Hopefully that pops out. I think it will help greatly with all pilot conversations to address that concern for school districts. That it's 15 to 20 years out, but it's somewhat relevant with respect to the first budget cycle they have to hit, and would, under current law, have to go to referendum for what is a bit of artificial jump. They have to levy for something that they've been just receiving in terms of revenue, but it has a dynamic impact on their budget adoption.
I have nothing. If there's questions from anyone that's remote or sitting here.
Pat, Jim, any comments, questions? Jim, you're representing both Lyme and Brownville, correct?
Yes, we are.
Okay, good. All right. Good, 2 birds in one stone.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah,
No, our office represents both Lyme and Brownville, yes.
good, all right.
Well, if there's no other questions, one last thing, Justin, could you send us the bill, the one house bill citation, or what number that is?
Yeah, I can dig that up and circulate that to you. If you could flip me your model that you shared on the screen today too, I'd like to take a look at that.
I thought I sent it to you.
I just forwarded it, just right before the meeting, Justin, when we found it, so.
Okay, cool. I appreciate that.
Like I said, there's some assumptions in here that will change dramatically before this project enters in the assessment role, from effective tax rates to the discount rate. The one thing I didn't mention is, if I read their proposal, the ORS documents, they're seeking a 20-year pilot, and we're not going to do 20 years here.
Yeah, we've already told them.
Yeah, so I didn't see where that was changed in any of their presentation. They also talk about a $500 a megawatt annual fee for 10 years that they have to distribute out to all residential property owners, are you aware of that, Justin? Is that?
If, I don't know, I haven't read their OR's decision. If that's one of their contingencies or conditions, that's interesting. If that's and who that gets made to, and what levy or roll or taxing jurisdiction it gets distributed through is interesting. The IDA might get tasked with being the ombudsman for that, but if there's a link.
I think it goes to the utility company.
Oh, it does, okay, I thought I heard something about some kind of mandatory 500 megawatt HCA, but
When you start thinking of the number in the town of Brownville and the town of Lyme, another number of residential meters, it will probably work out to $10 bill a year. You know? But that was something I gleaned from looking through their presentation. Is they talked about HCA's with the towns, and they talked about that, and they talked about pilot payments. And their number,
Yeah, and I don't know.
their number for total pilot payments was less than I would calculate you would do, but.
yeah,
That's all.
usually are.
Yeah, it may be interesting to pull their OR's decision. Most typically when we're at this point, there's a list of 100 or more conditions that they need to jump through, which could include even having to go to FERC at some point for various regulatory reasons. So in the big picture, as we're at this kind of nascent stage in the process, if I were to guess, this would be something in terms of an applicable tax status date to measure value, 2027, 2028, and then launch out 15 years from that. They have a couple of years of hard work conditions to meet before we get to what you would call a traditional closing and construction. So there's certainly time here to, so.
They were hoping in their first presentation to be operational in the second or third quarter of 2024, and we all know that's not going to happen.
Oh, gosh, no.
All right, well, if we get any kind of formal application, we'll keep everybody posted and keep you all in the loop.
And if there's any questions from this meeting, forward them to Dave, and we'll try to get you answers.
All right. All right, thanks all.
Have a great one.
Thank you. Thank you.